The morning sun cast long shadows across the parade ground of New Seoul Station as hundreds of military officers from dozens of worlds stood in perfect formation. Major Lee Hana adjusted her dress uniform one final time and checked her appearance. In the reflection of the polished metal wall beside her, everything looked perfect except for one thing that she had learned to ignore over the years: the complete absence of any medals or ribbons on her chest. General Park Dae-ho walked slowly down the line of his senior officers while the Velthian, Ambassador Krickstall, followed close behind. The alien dignitary was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that shimmered slightly in the artificial light. His large eyes moved constantly as he studied each human officer with obvious curiosity. This was his first visit to a human military installation, and everything seemed to fascinate him. "This is Colonel Kim Tae-min, my intelligence chief," General Park said as they stopped before a middle-aged man whose chest displayed an impressive array of service ribbons and commendation medals. The Vaelthian ambassador nodded respectfully and made some notes on a small device he carried. They moved to the next officer. "Captain Yoon Ji-woo, our best pilot," the general continued. Her uniform also showed several flight medals and achievement, ribbons that caught the light as she stood at attention. The ambassador seemed pleased to see such recognition of service. When they reached Hana, she felt the familiar tightness in her stomach that always came during these formal inspections. She had learned to keep her face completely neutral during moments like this. "Major Lee Hana, one of my most experienced officers," General Park said with a slight pause that only Hana noticed. She had served under him for 8 years, and read the subtle tension in his voice. Ambassador Krickstall stopped and tilted his head as he looked at Hana's uniform. His large eyes moved from her face, down to her chest, and back up again. The silence stretched for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds. "General Park," the ambassador said in his careful, precise way of speaking human languages, "I hope you will forgive my curiosity about your military customs. In Vaelthian culture, we believe that a warrior's achievements should be displayed proudly for all to see. Yet this officer, who you describe as one of your most experienced, wears no visible honors. Is this perhaps a human tradition I do not understand?" Hana felt every muscle in her body tense, but kept her expression unchanged. This was exactly the kind of question she had been dreading for years. General Park cleared his throat and gave what she recognized as his diplomatic smile. "Major Hana serves in a specialized capacity," he said carefully. "Her contributions to our military are valued highly, though they may not always be immediately visible." The ambassador seemed satisfied with this explanation, and they moved on to the next officer. But Hana could feel his eyes returning to her several more times during the remainder of the inspection. When the formal ceremony ended and the officers were dismissed, she noticed Colonel Kim Tae-min watching her with a concerned expression. The rest of the day passed normally with routine briefings and administrative work, but Hana could not shake the feeling that something had changed. She had spent years learning to blend into the background during official functions, to be present but unremarkable. The ambassador's question had made her feel exposed in a way she was not used to. That evening, as she was preparing to leave, her office, her communication device chimed with a message from General Park requesting her immediate presence in his private office. She made her way through the quiet corridors of the command center, passing only a few night shift personnel who nodded respectfully as she walked by. General Park's office was larger than most, but still felt cramped due to the massive desk covered, with data tablets and the walls lined with military manuals and star charts. He was standing by the window looking out at the docking bays where ships from various worlds came and went in a constant stream of activity. "Please sit down, Hana," he said without turning around. She took the chair across from his desk and waited. Over the years, she had learned that the general often needed a moment to organize his thoughts before difficult conversations. "The ambassador's question today," he finally said as he turned to face her. "It got me thinking about something I should have addressed long ago." Hana kept her voice level. "Sir, I understood the nature of my assignments when I accepted them. Recognition was never part of the equation." "That's exactly the problem," General Park said as he sat down heavily in his chair. "You've been serving for 12 years, Hana. You've completed assignments that most officers couldn't even imagine, much less execute successfully. Yet if anyone looks at your official record, They would think you've spent your entire career pushing papers in supply logistics. The irony of her cover story was not lost on either of them. According to her public military record, Major Lee Hanna worked in supply chain management for deep space installations. It was boring enough that no one ever asked follow-up questions, and common enough that she could discuss it convincingly with other officers during social functions. The ambassador wasn't being rude or suspicious, the general continued. He was genuinely trying to understand our military culture. But his question made me realize how unfair this situation has become. You've sacrificed more for humanity's security than any 10 other officers combined, yet you have to pretend to be a bureaucrat. Hanna shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She had spent so many years compartmentalizing her real work from her public identity that discussing them together felt wrong somehow. General, with respect, we both know why the classifications exist. The work I do only succeeds because no one knows I'm doing it. I'm not suggesting we announce your activities to the galaxy, General Parks said with a slight smile, but there has to be some way to acknowledge what you've accomplished without compromising operational security. Before Hanna could respond, there was a soft knock on the office door. General Park called for the visitor to enter, and Colonel Kim Taeman stepped inside carrying a sealed data case. I hope I'm not interrupting, Colonel Kim said, though his expression suggested this meeting had been planned. I brought the files you requested. Thank you, Taeman. Please join us, General Park said, gesturing to another chair. I was just explaining to Major Hanna that her lack of visible recognition has become a topic of discussion. Colonel Kim set the data case on the desk but did not open it. I've been her handler for most of her career, he said to General Park, then turned to look at Hanna. I've read every mission report, every debriefing note, every psychological evaluation. What she's accomplished in the field goes beyond anything we could have hoped for when we first recruited her. Hanna felt a familiar discomfort with being discussed as if she were not present, but she also recognized that both men were genuinely concerned about her situation. If I may ask, she said carefully, what exactly are you proposing? General Park leaned back in his chair and studied her face. I've been in contact with some people at the highest levels of our government. There are discussions about creating a new type of recognition for officers whose service cannot be acknowledged publicly. Something that would allow us to honor your contributions without compromising your operational effectiveness. The idea was intriguing but also troubling. Hanna had grown accustomed to operating in complete anonymity. The thought of any kind of recognition, even classified recognition, felt foreign to her. What would that look like practically? She asked. We're still working out the details, Colonel Kim said, opening the data case and removing several files. But first, I think it's important that you understand exactly what you've accomplished. Sometimes when you're living through these operations one at a time, you lose sight of the bigger picture. He placed the first file on the desk between them. The Kepler incident. You remember that one, I assume? Hanna felt her stomach drop. Of course she remembered. It was impossible to forget the mission that had changed everything for her, the one that had shown her exactly what she was capable of and what it would cost her. Yes, she said quietly. I remember. General Park leaned forward. I think it's time we talked about what really happened out there and what it meant for all of humanity. As Colonel Kim opened the file and began spreading classified documents across the desk, Hanna realized that this conversation was going to force her to confront parts of her past that she had spent years trying to bury. But perhaps it was finally time to acknowledge what she had done in the shadows, even if only to the two men who had guided her career from the beginning. Colonel Kim Taeman spread the classified documents across General Park's desk with careful precision. Each page bore the red markings that indicated the highest level of security classification in the human military. Hanna recognized the mission files immediately, even though she had not seen them since her final debriefing 6 years ago. The Kepler 442 system, Colonel Kim began, his voice taking on the clinical tone he used when discussing classified operations. What the public knows is that we discovered valuable mineral deposits there and established a small research station. What they don't know is that we weren't the first ones to find that system. Hanna closed her eyes briefly as the memories came, flooding back. She could still smell the recycled air of the transport ship that had carried her team to what they thought would be a routine intelligence-gathering mission. She had been 28 years old then, already a veteran of several covert operations, but still naive about the true scope of the threats facing humanity. "Tell me what you remember about the initial briefing," General Park said gently. He had not been her commanding officer during that mission, but he had read the files many times over the years. "We were told that long-range sensors had detected unusual energy signatures from the Kepler system," Hana said, opening her eyes and focusing on the documents before her. "The science teams thought it might be evidence of advanced technology left behind by an extinct civilization. Our job was to investigate and report back." "But that's not what you found," Colonel Kim said, pulling out a series of photographs that made Hana's breath catch in her throat. The images showed structures that were definitely not human in origin, but were also clearly not ancient ruins. They were sleek, functional buildings that looked like they had been constructed recently. More importantly, the energy readings indicated they were still active and occupied. "Sergeant Oh Byung-soo spotted the first patrol on our second-day planet side," Hana continued, her voice becoming more distant as she fell into the rhythm of a mission report. "Three beings approximately 2 meters tall, reptilian features, carrying what appeared to be advanced energy weapons. They moved in formation suggesting military training." General Park nodded as he pulled up additional files on his desk display. "What your team had discovered was a forward reconnaissance base operated by a species we later learned called themselves the Skarn. According to our xenobiologists, they're a highly aggressive reptilian race from the Draco sector." Hana remembered that day with perfect clarity despite her efforts to forget it. She and her team had spent hours observing the alien patrol from concealment, documenting their movements and trying to understand their technology. Sergeant O had been excited by the discovery, calling it the find of the century. He had no way of knowing that this first contact would cost him his life. "The mission parameters changed after we transmitted our initial report," Hana said, her training taking over as she recounted the events. "New orders came down from command within 6 hours. We were to conduct a full reconnaissance of the facility and determine its purpose." What she did not say, but what everyone in the room understood, was that those new orders had effectively turned a simple observation mission into something far more dangerous. The 3-person team had been equipped for stealth and reconnaissance, not for extended combat operations against an unknown alien threat. "Captain Yoon Ji-woo was supposed to extract us after 72 hours, Hana continued. "But we needed more time to understand what we were dealing with. The facility was much larger than initial scans had suggested." Colonel Kim pulled out a detailed schematic that Hana herself had drawn during the mission. It showed a complex underground installation with multiple levels extending deep into the planet's crust. The surface buildings had been just the visible portion of a much larger operation. "You discovered it was a staging area," General Park said, reading from another document. "Not just a research outpost or mining operation, but a full military preparation facility." Hana nodded grimly. "There were ships, General. Dozens of them hidden in underground hangars. And the computers we managed to access." She paused, still, troubled by what they had found even after all these years. They contained detailed information about human colony worlds, shipping routes, military installations, everything someone would need to plan a comprehensive invasion. The silence in the room grew heavy as the implications of her words settled. This had not been a chance encounter with an unknown alien species. The Skarn had been actively preparing to attack human space, and they had been doing it for years. "Sergeant O wanted to call for immediate backup," Hana said, her voice becoming even quieter. "He argued that this was too big for our small team to handle alone. But calling for backup would have meant revealing that humans had discovered their operation." General Park leaned forward in his chair. "And you made the decision to proceed with the original team?" "Yes, sir," Hana replied, meeting his eyes directly. "The mission parameters were clear. Gather intelligence and maintain operational security. If the Skarn knew we had discovered their base, they would either accelerate their invasion timeline or relocate to another system we couldn't monitor." What followed had been 3 of the most difficult days of Hana's military career. Her team had spent nearly 72 hours infiltrating deeper levels of the alien facility, copying data files and documenting military capabilities while avoiding patrols of increasingly suspicious Skarn soldiers. "The breakthrough came when you accessed their central communications array," Colonel Kim said, consulting his files. "You discovered they were in contact with a much larger fleet positioned just outside human sensor range. Hana remembered the moment with perfect clarity. She had been alone in the communications center, having left her two teammates to guard the entrance, when she managed to break through the alien encryption. The data she found had been beyond her worst fears. The Kepler facility was just one of a dozen similar bases the Skarn had established around human space. They were planning a coordinated attack that would hit every major human world simultaneously. The invasion was scheduled to begin in less than 2 weeks, she said. But there was something else. The Skarn were not working alone. They had allies, among other alien species who saw humanity as a threat to their own expansion plans. General Park pulled up a star chart showing the location of all known Skarn facilities that had been discovered after Hana's mission. Your intelligence allowed us to identify and monitor all of their forward bases. More importantly, it gave us advance warning of the invasion timeline. But first you had to deal with the immediate threat, Colonel Kim said, his expression growing serious. The facility you were investigating had to be eliminated without leaving any evidence of human involvement. This was the part of the mission that still haunted Hana's dreams. Destroying the Skarn base had been the easy part. Her team carried enough explosives to level the entire facility. The difficult part had been making it look like an accident or internal conflict rather than sabotage by human forces. We rigged the power core to overload, Hana said mechanically. The explosion would destroy all evidence of our presence while making it appear that the Skarn had suffered a catastrophic equipment failure, but someone had to stay behind to ensure the charges detonated properly. Sergeant O volunteered, General Park said softly. Hana felt the familiar tightness in her chest that always came when she remembered her teammates' sacrifice. He said someone with technical expertise needed to monitor the detonation sequence to ensure complete destruction of the facility. I should have been the one to stay. You were the team leader, Colonel Kim reminded her gently. Your responsibility was to ensure the mission succeeded and that critical intelligence reached command. The final hours of the mission had been a nightmare of split-second decisions and impossible choices. Hana had been forced to choose between saving her teammate and ensuring that humanity received advance warning of the Skarn invasion. In the end, there had been no real choice at all. Sergeant O transmitted the final data burst at the same time the charges detonated, she said. The explosion was visible from orbit and completely destroyed the facility. As far as the Skarn knew, they had lost a forward base to equipment failure. And that intelligence allowed humanity to prepare for the invasion, General Park said. When the Skarn fleet arrived 2 weeks later, they found human forces ready and waiting for them. The subsequent battle had been brief but decisive. Human forces, warned by Hana's intelligence, had been able to position themselves advantageously and had destroyed the Skarn invasion fleet before it could reach any human worlds. The alien species had sued for peace within days, agreeing to withdraw from human space permanently. The official record shows that the Kepler system suffered an industrial accident, Colonel Kim said, gathering up the classified documents. The science teams found valuable minerals but decided the system was too unstable for permanent settlement. No mention of alien contact or military action. Hana stared at the empty desk where the files had been spread. Sergeant Oh Byung-soo died saving billions of human lives, but his family thinks he was killed in a mining accident. They'll never know what he really accomplished. Colonel Kim Tae-min reached into his secure data case and withdrew 3 more file folders, each bearing different classification markings and date stamps spanning several years. Hana recognized the distinctive blue covers that indicated operations. Conducted under the deepest levels of secrecy, missions so classified that even their existence was known only to a handful of people in the entire human military. After Kepler, you became our go-to operative for situations requiring extended deep cover work, Colonel Kim said as he arranged the files on General Park's desk. The success of that mission proved that humans could adapt to alien environments and cultures in ways that our xenopsychologists had thought impossible. General Park studied the file covers with interest. Even as a senior general, he had not been cleared to read these particular mission reports until recently. These are the Proxima operations? 3 separate missions conducted over a period of 2 years, Colonel Kim confirmed. Each one presented unique challenges that required different aspects of human adaptability and ingenuity. Hana felt a familiar sense of disconnection as she looked at the files, Reading about her own missions always felt strange, as if she were learning about someone else's life. The psychological compartmentalization that allowed her to function in deep cover also made it difficult to integrate those experiences with her regular identity. The first operation began 8 months after Kepler, Colonel Kim said, opening the file marked Operation Diplomatic Shadow. We had received intelligence suggesting that certain officials in the Zephyrian government were providing information about human colony locations to unknown third parties. The Zephyrians were one of humanity's earliest allies in the galactic community, a peaceful species known for their elaborate diplomatic protocols and their extensive trade networks. The possibility that some of their officials were involved in activities that could threaten human settlements had been deeply troubling to command. I was assigned to work undercover as a cultural attaché in the human embassy on Zephyr Prime, Hana said, her voice taking on the measured tone she used when discussing classified operations. My cover identity was Dr. Lee Hana, a specialist in comparative cultural studies working on a research project about interspecies diplomatic traditions. It had been a challenging assignment in ways that were completely different from the Kepler mission. Instead of avoiding contact with aliens, she had been required to immerse herself completely in Zephyrian society while maintaining a false academic persona that could withstand close scrutiny. The Zephyrians have a complex social hierarchy based on extended family relationships and professional achievements, she continued. Understanding their cultural patterns was essential to identifying which officials might be susceptible to outside influence. Colonel Kim pulled out several photographs showing Hana in various social settings on Zephyr Prime. In the images, she appeared completely at ease among the tall, graceful aliens with their distinctive silver skin and elaborate ceremonial robes. To anyone looking at these photos, she seemed like exactly what her cover story claimed, a human academic studying alien culture. What made this mission particularly difficult was the time requirement, General Park observed, reading from the mission summary. 8 months of deep cover while maintaining academic credentials and conducting a complex counterintelligence investigation. Hana nodded. The Zephyrians place enormous importance on personal relationships and trust. Any investigation had to be conducted slowly and carefully to avoid arousing suspicion. I spent the first 3 months simply establishing my academic credentials and building relationships with key government officials. The breakthrough had come during a formal dinner, celebrating a trade agreement between Zephyr Prime and one of the outer human colonies. Hana had been seated next to Assistant Trade Minister Velthara Zindar, a mid-level official who seemed nervous and distracted throughout the evening. Assistant Minister Zindar made several casual comments about human shipping schedules that were unusually specific and detailed, Hana recalled. Information that should not have been available to someone at her level in the Trade Ministry. But you couldn't simply confront her directly, Colonel Kim noted. Any accusation against a Zephyrian official by a human diplomat would have created a serious diplomatic incident. Instead, Hana had spent weeks carefully cultivating a friendship with the assistant minister, using her cover as a cultural researcher to ask seemingly innocent questions about Zephyrian trade practices and government procedures. Gradually, a picture had emerged of a corruption network that reached much higher levels than anyone had suspected. The assistant minister was being blackmailed, Hana said. She had accumulated significant gambling debts through a Zephyrian vice that's roughly equivalent to human stock market speculation. A consortium of off-world interests was offering to pay her debts in exchange for information about human shipping routes and colony defense capabilities. General Park frowned as he read through the investigation files. These off-world interests, were they connected to the Skarn? No, sir, Hana replied. This was a different threat entirely. The consortium was made up of several species that operated what could best be described as an interstellar organized crime network. They were selling human colony locations to slavers and pirates. The scope of the conspiracy had been staggering. Over a period of several years, the criminal consortium had purchased information about dozens of human settlements, leading to attacks that the human government had attributed to random piracy. In reality, these were carefully planned raids targeting colonies with valuable resources or defenseless populations. The challenge was gathering enough evidence to expose the entire network without revealing how we had obtained the information, Colonel Kim said. If the Zephyrians learned that we had been conducting covert surveillance of their government officials, It could have destroyed our alliance with them. Hana had solved this problem through a combination of careful manipulation and what could only be described as elaborate theater. Over several weeks, she had gradually convinced Assistant Minister Zindar that her gambling debts were being investigated by Zephyrian internal security forces. I created a false identity as a Zephyrian security investigator and arranged to, accidentally, encounter the Assistant Minister during one of her meetings with the off-world contacts, Hana explained. The fear of exposure caused her to confess everything to the real Zephyrian authorities, who then conducted their own investigation. The result had been the exposure and arrest of 17 Zephyrian officials involved in the corruption network, along with the dismantling of the criminal consortium's entire operation in that sector of space. Dozens of planned attacks on human colonies had been prevented, and several captured human civilians had been recovered and returned to their families. And your role in the investigation remained completely hidden, General Park said with obvious admiration. The Zephyrians believe they uncovered the conspiracy through their own security services. The second operation was completely different in nature, Colonel Kim said, opening the file marked Operation Asteroid Miners. This time we needed someone who could pass as an industrial engineer working in deep space mining operations. The photographs in this file showed Hana in coveralls and safety equipment, looking like any other human worker in the asteroid mining facilities of the outer system. But her actual mission had been far more complex than manual labor. We had received reports that a consortium of alien corporations was conducting unauthorized mining operations in asteroids claimed by human settlements, Hana said. The legal situation was complicated because the mining rights overlapped with several different territorial claims. What made the situation particularly troubling was that the unauthorized mining was being conducted by species that were supposedly allies of humanity. If the human government had confronted them directly, it could have created diplomatic problems with multiple alien worlds. My cover identity was Engineer Choi Min-ho, a freelance mining consultant hired to evaluate the efficiency of the consortium's operations, Hana said. This gave me access to their facilities and computer systems without arousing suspicion. Over a period of 3 months, Hana had worked alongside alien mining crews while secretly documenting their activities and gathering evidence of their unauthorized operations. But what she discovered had been far worse than simple theft of mineral resources. They were using human prisoners as forced labor, she said quietly. People who had been reported missing from attacks on merchant vessels or remote colonies. The consortium was working with the same criminal networks that we had uncovered during the Zephyrian operation. The alien corporations had been using their legitimate mining operations as cover for much darker activities. Human prisoners were being forced to work in the most dangerous sections of the mining facilities, areas where alien workers would have required expensive protective equipment. The mining accidents that destroyed 3 of their major facilities were actually sabotage operations, General Park said, reading from the classified mission report. You eliminated the forced labor operations while making it appear that the consortium had simply suffered a series of industrial failures. The secure files disappeared back into Colonel Kim's data case, but the weight of their contents seemed to linger in the air of General Park's office. Hana sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, as both men studied her with expressions of concern and respect. She had grown accustomed to keeping her emotions carefully controlled during these discussions, but something about tonight felt different. There's another aspect of your service that we need to discuss, General Park said gently. The personal cost of the work you've been doing. Colonel Kim pulled out a different type of file, this one marked with medical classification symbols rather than operational security markings. Dr. Kang Sujin has been your assigned psychologist for the past 4 years. She's provided us with some insights into the challenges you've been facing. Hana felt a familiar tightness in her chest at the mention of her therapy sessions. Dr. Kang was one of the few people who knew the full scope of her classified activities, and their regular meetings had become a necessary anchor to reality after particularly difficult operations. The genetic modifications required for the Thurinth mission alone would have been enough to end most military careers, Colonel Kim continued, consulting the medical files. But you've undergone physical alterations for at least 6 different operations over the past decade. The modifications were something Hana preferred not to think about when possible. Each deep cover mission requiring her to pass as a member of another species had necessitated temporary changes to her physiology, altered skin pigmentation, modified bone density, enhanced sensory capabilities, and in some cases more dramatic, alterations that had taken months to reverse. The latest round of gene therapy was completed just 3 months ago, General Park said, reading from Dr. Kang's reports. You're still experiencing chronic pain from the cellular reconstruction process. It's manageable, Hana said automatically, the same response she gave during her medical evaluations. In truth, the constant ache in her bones and joints was something she had learned to ignore through necessity, but it colored every day of her life. According to Dr. Kang, you also suffer from what she terms identity displacement syndrome, Colonel Kim said carefully. The psychological difficulty of integrating multiple false personas with your core identity. This was harder for Hana to dismiss. The extended periods of deep cover had required her to become other people so completely that returning to her original self had become increasingly difficult. Sometimes she would catch herself thinking in alien languages or responding to situations according to the customs of species she had lived among months earlier. I manage that as well, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. General Park leaned forward in his chair. Hana, you don't have to pretend with us. We've read the reports. We know what this work has cost you. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Hana considered how much to reveal. She had spent years building walls between her professional responsibilities and her personal struggles, but sitting in this office with the 2 men who had guided her career, those walls felt less necessary. There are nights when I wake up and don't remember which identity I'm supposed to be, she admitted quietly. During the Thoranth mission, I lost the ability to think as an individual human for several weeks. Dr. Kang says that's normal given the circumstances, but it doesn't feel normal. Colonel Kim made a note in his files. What about your family relationships? This question hit harder than the others. Hana's younger brother Lee Min-soo worked as a civilian engineer on one of the orbital shipyards. According to her cover story, she was a supply logistics officer who spent most of her time at remote installations managing equipment inventories. Min-soo worried that her job was boring and isolated, completely unaware that his sister had prevented multiple alien invasions and saved thousands of lives. My brother thinks I'm wasting my talents pushing paperwork, Hana said with a bitter smile. He keeps encouraging me to apply for a transfer to more exciting work. He has no idea that I've seen more of the galaxy than any 10 other humans combined. And romantic relationships? General Park asked gently. Hana was quiet for a long moment. This was perhaps the most painful aspect of her service. There was someone, she said finally. Captain Nam Ho-seok. We worked together on 2 operations before his security clearance was revoked after a minor protocol violation. She did not elaborate on the details, but both men understood the implications. Maintaining a relationship with someone who lacked the highest levels of security clearance was impossible when your entire life was classified. Captain Nam had been transferred to a different command after it became clear that their relationship was compromising operational security. He still sends messages occasionally, Hana said quietly, asking if I want to meet for dinner when I'm back on Earth. I can't explain why I'm never available without revealing information he's not cleared to know. Dr. Kang had spent many sessions helping Hana process the loss of that relationship. The loneliness of deep cover work was manageable when she was actively engaged in a mission, but during the periods between operations, the isolation became overwhelming. There have been others, she continued. Brief relationships that ended when I had to disappear for months at a time without explanation. Eventually, I stopped trying. Colonel Kim closed the medical files with a snap that sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet office. Dr. Kang's recommendation is that you be transitioned away from deep cover operations within the next year. She believes that continued long-term assignments could result in permanent psychological damage. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Hana had known this conversation was coming eventually, but hearing it stated so directly forced her to confront a future she had been avoiding. Thinking about? What would that look like? She asked. Promotion to colonel, General Park said without hesitation. Assignment to training and development of new deep cover operatives. You would use your experience to prepare the next generation of agents, while remaining in an operational capacity that doesn't require extended periods away from your core identity. It was an attractive offer in many ways. Hana had often thought about what she could teach younger operatives about surviving deep cover assignments and managing the psychological challenges of extended false identities. But the idea of giving up field work entirely felt like losing a fundamental part of herself. "There's something else," Colonel Kim said, his expression becoming more serious. "We've received intelligence suggesting that several alien governments are beginning to suspect that humanity has more advanced intelligence capabilities than we've publicly acknowledged." This was the nightmare scenario that had haunted human intelligence services since the beginning of their covert operations. If alien governments began actively looking for human spies, it would make future deep cover missions exponentially more dangerous. "The Zephyrian government has started conducting more thorough background checks on all human diplomatic personnel," he continued. "And the mining consortium that you sabotaged has hired private investigators to look into the accidents that destroyed their facilities. So far, they haven't connected anything to human intelligence operations," General Park added quickly. "But it's only a matter of time before someone starts asking the right questions." Hana felt a familiar mixture of pride and anxiety. Her successes had been so complete that they were beginning to attract unwanted attention. It was the classic problem of intelligence work. The more effective you were, the more likely you were to be discovered. "There's also the matter of your age," Colonel Kim said diplomatically. "You're 34 now. Most deep cover operatives burn out much earlier in their careers. The physical demands of repeated genetic modifications and extended psychological stress were cumulative. Each mission left lasting effects that made subsequent operations more difficult and dangerous. Hana was already pushing the limits of what the human body and mind could endure." "I understand the reasoning," she said carefully, "but I need to know that humanity will still be protected. The threats we've identified haven't disappeared just because we've disrupted a few operations. That's exactly why we need you in a training role," General Park said earnestly. "One experienced operative can train dozens of new agents. Your knowledge and expertise are too valuable to risk on additional field missions." As they discussed the details of her potential new assignment, Hana found herself thinking about all the things she had given up for her current role. A normal family life, stable relationships, even the simple pleasure of being able to tell people what she did for a living. The idea of stepping back from active operations was both terrifying and oddly appealing. "There's one more thing," Colonel Kim said as he prepared to leave. "The promotion to colonel would require a formal ceremony. Even if most of your service record remains classified, you would finally receive some visible recognition for your contributions to human security." The irony was not lost on any of them. After years of operating in complete anonymity, Hana would finally receive the kind of recognition that Ambassador Krixtal had noticed was missing from her uniform. But that recognition would come only after she agreed to step away from the work that had defined her adult life. "I need time to consider this," she said finally. 1 week after her late-night conversation with General Park and Colonel Kim, Hana found herself standing outside a secure conference room she had never seen before. The location was deep within the classified levels of New Sol Station in a section that required 3 different biometric scans just to access the corridor. The message requesting her presence had been brief and formal, but something in the tone suggested this meeting would be different from their previous discussions. When she entered the room, Hana was surprised to find it filled with people she recognized but had never expected to see gathered in one place. Admiral Song Ki-young, the fleet commander, stood near the head of a long table. Director Lim A-ra from Human Intelligence Services was reviewing documents with several other officials she didn't immediately recognize. Most surprising of all, Ambassador Krixtal was present, though he appeared to be studying a data tablet rather than participating in the conversation. "Major Hana," General Park said as she entered, "please take a seat. We have some things to discuss." The formality of the gathering made Hana nervous in a way that even the most dangerous missions rarely did. She had spent years avoiding attention from high-ranking officials, and finding herself the apparent focus of their collective interest was deeply unsettling. "Before we begin," Admiral Song said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected entire star systems, "I want you to understand that everything discussed in this room today has been approved at the highest levels of our government. What we're proposing represents a significant change in how we recognize certain types of service to humanity. Director Lim looked up from her documents and fixed Hana with an intense stare. Your service record makes for fascinating reading, Major. In 12 years of classified operations, you've prevented 2 potential invasions, dismantled 3 major criminal conspiracies, and saved several thousand human lives. Yet, according to your official personnel file, your most significant accomplishment was implementing a new inventory tracking system for mining equipment. The absurdity of her cover story had always amused Hana in a dark way, but hearing it discussed in this formal setting made it seem almost insulting. She had spent years pretending to be a bureaucrat, while actually serving as one of humanity's most effective intelligence operatives. The question posed by Ambassador Crickstail last week highlighted a problem we've been aware of for some time, General Park said. How do we acknowledge the contributions of personnel whose work must remain classified for operational security reasons? Ambassador Crickstail looked up from his tablet and spoke for the first time since Hana had entered the room. In Velthian culture, we have a saying that translates roughly as, honor without recognition is still honor, but recognition without understanding is meaningless. After learning more about human military customs, I believe you face a unique challenge in balancing operational security with the need to acknowledge exceptional service. Hana found herself curious about what exactly the ambassador had been told about her activities. His security clearance obviously did not extend to operational details, but someone had clearly briefed him on the general nature of her service. We've developed a solution, Admiral Song said, opening a sealed case that had been sitting on the table in front of him. The Shadow Service Cross, a new decoration specifically designed to recognize contributions that cannot be publicly acknowledged. The metal inside the case was unlike any military decoration Hana had ever seen. Instead of the bright colors and elaborate designs typical of most service ribbons, it was crafted from black metal with subtle silver inlays that seemed to shift in the light. The design was elegant but understated, beautiful in a way that would not attract attention from casual observers. The Shadow Service Cross will be awarded only to personnel whose classified activities have significantly contributed to human security, Director Lim explained. Recipients will be authorized to wear the decoration, but its meaning will be known only to those with appropriate security clearances. It's a way of acknowledging your service without compromising operational security, General Park added. Other intelligence personnel will recognize what the decoration represents, but to outside observers, it will simply appear to be another military ribbon. Hana studied the medal with mixed emotions. Part of her was deeply moved by the recognition, but another part worried about the implications of making her service visible in any way. Sir, won't wearing any kind of decoration compromise my ability to maintain cover as a logistics officer? That brings us to the second part of today's discussion, Admiral Song said with a slight smile. We're promoting you to Colonel, effective immediately. Your new assignment will be as Director of Special Operations Training, responsible for developing and implementing advanced intelligence training programs. The promotion was exactly what General Park and Colonel Kim had discussed the week before, but hearing it announced so formally made it feel suddenly real. After 12 years of operating in the shadows, she would finally have a position that matched her actual experience and capabilities. You'll be working with carefully selected personnel to train the next generation of deep cover operatives, Director Lim said. Your knowledge and experience are too valuable to risk on additional field operations, but they're essential for ensuring that future agents are properly prepared for the challenges they'll face. Colonel Kim stepped forward carrying a folder that Hana recognized as containing her new assignment orders. You'll also be conducting research into improved psychological support systems for long-term classified operations. Dr. Kang Soo-jin will be working with you to develop better methods for helping operatives maintain their core identities during extended deep cover assignments. The new role appealed to Hana in ways she hadn't expected. The idea of helping other agents avoid some of the psychological pitfalls she had experienced felt like a meaningful way to use her hard-earned knowledge. It would also allow her to remain connected to intelligence operations without subjecting herself to the physical and mental stress of additional missions. There's one more thing, General Park said, gesturing toward Ambassador Crickstail. The ambassador has requested permission to make a brief statement about military recognition customs in general terms during the next diplomatic briefing. Nothing specific about you or your activities, but an acknowledgement that warriors sometimes serve in ways that cannot be celebrated publicly. Ambassador Krikstal nodded respectfully toward Hana. In Vaelthian culture, we understand that some battles must be fought in darkness to preserve the light. We wish to express our respect for those who serve in such capacity, regardless of their species. The formal ceremony that followed was unlike anything Hana had experienced in her military career. Admiral Song presented her with the Shadow Service Cross, while Director Lim read a citation that managed to acknowledge her contributions without revealing any operational details. The language was carefully crafted to honor her service while maintaining the security requirements that had governed her entire career. For extraordinary service in defense of human interests under conditions requiring the highest levels of operational security, Director Lim read. Colonel Lee Hana has demonstrated exceptional courage, adaptability, and dedication in assignments that cannot be publicly acknowledged but have significantly contributed to the safety and security of human civilization. As she pinned the Shadow Service Cross to her new colonel's uniform, Hana felt a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in finally receiving recognition for her service, relief at the prospect of stepping back from active operations, and sadness for the teammates who had not survived to see this moment. There's a memorial database for classified operations personnel, General Park said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Sergeant Oh Byung-soo and the others who didn't make it home are honored there, even if their sacrifices can't be publicly acknowledged. After the ceremony, as the various officials dispersed to their other duties, Hana found herself alone with General Park and Colonel Kim. The weight of the new insignia on her uniform felt strange after so many years of wearing. No visible recognition for her service. How does it feel? Colonel Kim asked. Different, Hana said honestly. I've spent so many years defining myself by what I couldn't tell people about my work. Having even this small acknowledgement feels like stepping into an entirely new identity. General. Park smiled. You'll adapt. It's what you do best. That evening, Hana visited the classified memorial database for the first time in years. The names of fallen intelligence operatives were listed not on stone monuments where the public could see them, but in secure computer files accessible only to those who had served alongside them. She found Sergeant Oh Byung-soo's entry and added a brief note about the ceremony and her promotion. The memorial database also contained entries for operatives from other missions she had known about but not participated in directly. Reading through their records, she was struck by the scope of threats that humanity faced in secret, and the number of people who had given their lives to address those threats, without any hope of public recognition.